The following podcast is sponsored by Words and Pictures Comics, located at 2610 Center Street, number 6. Words and Pictures is your one-stop shop for vintage back issues and cutting-edge graphic novels. Awesome service, great shop. Check them out. Welcome, everyone, to episode 237 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Penteleresco. I write stuff and podcast 2. Today, part 1 of my 2-part conversation with Stacey Smekofske is live. Stacey is an editor and also book reviewer. We had a really fun conversation. We talked about Tim, how she got into editing, the whole 9 yards. It's a great conversation, and I can't wait for you to get to it. But this is also kind of a start of a new era, and I have to get to the fun commercial stuff. Words and Pictures has happily provided me with copies of graphic novels to give away over the next several weeks. In my hands right now is Superman, Wonder Woman, the series done by Charles Soule and Tony Daniel. It's an awesome run. The first arc especially is really, really good, and that's what I'm holding in my hands right now. And I'm going to be giving this away Thursday. So how can you enter this? Well, if you note at the description of the episode, there is a link to my MailChimp. It's on Podomatic for sure. It also will be listed in both my Patreon and my Facebook page. You can definitely check those things out. And you can just, all you got to do to enter is put your email in the list. Randomly, I will select one person on Thursday, and I don't care where it is in the world, you will get this book. So everybody's eligible. I'll even pay and I'll suffer the international postage. It's all not a big deal to me. The important thing is to get this really rolling and on the go. Words and Pictures is a great comic shop in Calgary. They do awesome back issues. They have an amazing back issue selection, but they also have a really good graphic novel selection. So you guys should definitely check them out. You should tell them I came in and said how I recommended you. Do that, and on to the show. We'll get to my stuff at the end. For now, though, let's just get to our conversation, shall we?
How do you know Tim?
We did a show called Spilling Ink, and we were both mutual guests, and we were pushing Jason Lavelle out of his comfort zone. And we just started talking after the air. We actually, so we were talking about our particular hard times in our life. And it was funny because Katie and Jason went completely silent as we were talking about some of the shit we'd been through. So Tim was like, yeah, I should do your show. And he was one of my terrible Skype conversations. I figured I had to do it right. I don't know what the hell happened with him. His was really bad for some reason. And so we did 2.
Aww.
We did 2. And, but no, Tim's a really cool dude. He really, really is a cool dude. So, anyway.
That's awesome.
Anyway.
I was wondering about that because I often wonder how he meets the people he meets. He's usually out there meeting a whole bunch of people all the time, and I'm always kind of impressed with how he's able to reach out like that.
Well, it's part of it is part of the game today. I mean, people think networking is a dirty word, but the truth of the matter is, you go there as you do this. You find that you have to meet people, right? You just have to,
right?
And considering what I do too with the podcast, I mean, I have to literally go out of my way to meet people as well, right? And I have to seek them out. I've dabbled in publicity a little bit myself, so I'm like, okay, I have to. That's how I met Jason and Katie. And you just meet people that as you're going down this, and you just sort of like, okay, so this is who you are, and this is what you do, and suddenly you know all kinds of people you never thought you know. You know, like I met Spider Robinson. I have his phone number.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Right, I have his phone number. I ran into him at the Aurora Awards in Vancouver. So the Auroras, they have what they call, here, I'll show you. This is an Aurora Award pin, right?
Oh, cool, yeah.
All right, so when you go,
like a maple leaf.
Yeah, it's like a maple leaf. It's the Canadian Science Fiction Award, and so every year you go, there's a pinning ceremony. So for first-time nominees, myself included, and Spider happened to wander by as he's doing a concert that night. So hey, Spider, come get your new pin. So Spider comes in, gets his new pin. So I briefly meet him there as he's about to do a performance. But where I actually got a chance to talk to him was, and I don't tell the story all on the air. I was supposed to interview Charles Stross for the podcast. He said yes when I met him. He kind of blew me off. But the next day, Spider's checking out of the hotel after his concert, and I'm like, I gotta take this chance. He's right here. If I don't get this do this now, I'll never get this chance again. So I help him with some directions. I go, hey, listen, I do a podcast. Would you like to come on? Yeah, sure. He gives me his email, his phone number. We'll set something up and we'll do it. That's it. There's no magic to it.
Wow.
Yeah. There's no. With you're a reviewer. You do book stuff and all that stuff, right? So the biggest thing So the biggest thing.
So I don't.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say I don't know really who your audience is, but it seems like it's vast.
It's getting there. It's getting there.
It just seems like it's really what the word it's broad. Like you've got people over here that are interested in these things. You've got people over here that are interested. It's kind of like you don't really have a real niched out audience. They're really
yes and no. It's still what I would call a niche, but what's happening is, so if you listen to a few of these, we don't talk about anything in particular. All right, I go, if you have something incriminating you'd like to say, make it good, and then we start, and then we just start talking about whatever we start talking about, and then what ends up happening is, so the goal of the podcast, the goal of it, and I've said this to everybody, is I want to give the audience a sense of who you are, because authors generally suck. This is what I have found. Authors generally suck at projecting who they are, and it's unfortunate because, again, we live in an age today where publishing books is easy, right? Really, really easy to do. But we also live in an age of books now that since anybody can publish a book, how do I differentiate from Stacey? I'm going to ask her last name and how to actually properly say it so I don't actually embarrass them.
It's pronounced in 3 syllables. It's Smekofske.
Smekofske. Okay.
Very good. See?
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah. I want to make sure. I want to make sure it didn't sound funny.
I totally agree with you. And I think the problem with authors is, it's Polish. I would say that the reason authors are probably like that, though, is because most authors are introverted.
Oh, sure.
They're not extroverts, and so they don't really know how to sell themselves. When most book authors, they're learning to be extroverted with their thoughts, and you splay your life out onto your pages, and you publish that book, and then you turn around and you're publishing it, which means you're ridicule. And then what happens is you have to turn around and say, I'm good enough that you should buy that. And that is it's almost like a contradiction in authors' heads. It's a complete paradox. They have no idea how, I've already put all my life work, blood, sweat, tears into these pages. Isn't that good enough? It's hard for some to write and then to turn around
it's hard for a lot. But I mean, if you look at it, most artists, any genre, any field, are introverts. All of them. Even a musician, go out there, they go and perform. They are some of the shyest people on the planet. They really are. But the thing about a painter has an advantage that you can see what a painter does. You can just see it. A musician has a performance. That's how they actually draw people in to buy their albums, concerts, CDs. So you have to invest some time in a musician, but you don't necessarily invest a lot of time. 5 minutes. A book, you don't know if it's good usually until you actually open the book. So the author's challenge is, how do I get them to open the book? Because I know it's good, but how do I do that? The truth of the matter is, with authors, you have to convince your readers to invest the time. That's the challenge. So one of the best ways to do that is to be a human being. Now, again, you don't have to necessarily give away all your deep, dark secrets in one conversation. But
it can help.
Oh, everybody does. Just so I know that. I know this from everybody does. But the truth of the matter is, right? It's not about that. It's about, okay, can I be a human being? And are you someone I would like to have a drink with, talk to? Are you approachable? Are you genuine? Are you authentic? And you don't necessarily have to be loud, although some people like me are obnoxiously loud. It's the fact of the matter is, right, that you are going out there. You're going out there and saying, here I am. And the fact that you put a book out there means you have the audacity on some level to do it. Even if it's just on a small scale, you're still doing it. So you have to make the choice of, okay, I am putting my book out there. I am doing this. Let me introduce myself. Don't worry. People are only scary for the first, ever. But that's okay. I'm out there. They want to, they think it's cool because I'm an author. I put this book out there they're really interested in. Half my work's done. They're just curious. All I have to do is close the deal. I know that's a sales term, but the truth is it's not a huge stretch. It's just you have to be willing to go out there and go, here I am. This is my book, and this is why it's awesome. I've done a professional wrestling reference because it's a really good one for this reason. Because if you look at the old 80s, early 80s, the mid 80s, late 80s interviews, like me and Gene Okerlund would interview these guys about coming into an arena to, like, seriously, the absurdity of this. These guys are in grown-ass costumes. They look like people from another planet. They got muscles on their muscles because of all the wonderful steroids they did back in the day. But they are trying to get people to come to the arena to watch people kick their ass. And the really good ones, whether it's Hulk Hogan or whether it's the Macho Man or whether it's somebody else, Macho Man's my favorite. His stuff made no sense, but it was awesome, right? But the thing is, they believed it, and because they believed it, they could project that belief to the screen and draw you in. Another one who was really good at that was Jake Roberts. He never raised his voice, but he could spellbound you. He understood how to tell a story in a way that people would be drawn to him. And that's the secret. You're doing the same thing whether you're at a bookstore, whether you're at there. Like, be approachable, be real, be genuine. Give people a reason to invest in you. If you do that, people will give you a shot. Now, they still might hate your stuff. You still will not be for everyone. I mean, you got to accept that. It's just part of the game.
Right.
But if you're willing to do those things, right, you're going to find sooner or later people are going to be interested in what you do. The reason this podcast is growing is because, I've been brainwashing people for about 200 plus episodes. I bring out an episode every so often, right? I bring interesting people. We talk about whatever we talk about.
Right.
All right. And sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's just very, very technical. Sometimes it's very, it's really personal. There are some really, really personal stories that I've had the privilege of putting on the podcast.
Right.
Right. And this is nothing I planned. We haven't discussed questions or anything going into this interview. And
yeah.
Right. And because I don't do that, we just talk.
You just let it go organic.
Yeah, because people because again, it's about being authentic. So right. I could ask you a question about your books and why they're awesome and made of cheese and all that other wonderful fun stuff. But the truth of the matter is that's 5 minutes of a conversation at the most, right?
Well, and the truth is that I don't write books. The reason I'm an editor. I'm not an author. I mean, I do write a few things, but I keep it close to the chest. And like you, I think I saw that you blog. Is that right?
I blog. I've also got 3 books out so far. So
yeah. So I've seen. I think I've seen your blog. But I blog just because that's how I get my. I don't like writing fiction, but I'm an avid reader. And so one of the things that I decided to do is take that love of reading and that passion that I have for helping a story become great is I channel that. And that's why that's why I edit. And I honestly, the main reason I got into this is because there are so many people out there, like you said, so many authors out there and so many indie writers out there that they're flooding the gates, but they're not creating a quality story. And they're not creating a quality story because it really kind of does play on to that insecurity. They're insecure in their own self, and so they just don't want to have that critique or that criticism come in. And I wanted to be the editor where they could go, oh, you know what, actually Stacey isn't telling me this stuff because she's being mean, and Stacey really wants me to succeed, and I really want to create that relationship with my authors. I want them to understand that their story means just as much to me as it does to them, and that I'm trying my best to help them create the best so that people will buy it.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what an author wants. An author wants to make money on their story. Otherwise, why would they even write it? Otherwise, you just write in your journal and you keep it, tucked away in your bookshelf.
Well, everybody writes for a different reason, but if you're putting yourself out there, you're hoping somebody's going to pick it up. That's the idea. That's the hope, right? So,
right.
The challenge of that, there's a lot of other challenges that go with it, but the fact of the matter is, and I do this too with my own editing and stuff like that, is I go for outside people that help and want to care, because ultimately I think most editors give a shit. I mean, that's the, like, if they're really, really good, they have to give a shit, because if they don't,
they have to.
Yeah, because if they don't, they suck. I mean, it's gonna come out when they do their edits and suggestions. They might have some technical stuff that's right here and there, but they're not going to go to the author and say, hey, listen, this scene here where Wile E. Coyote is actually flying off the cliff right now? He shouldn't be flying. He should be realizing that he is over a cliff right now and he's about to fall, right? And you need to actually make that the focus of the story being told. He's going to hit splat. That's not the point. The point is that realization he's going to hit splat, and you need to work really, really hard to make sure that is emphasized to the reader, because that will make them laugh / cry. So, right, and good.
Well, yeah, but it's also, this is the other thing this is kind of one of those things that I think that a lot of editors lack, and it's that ability to make that personal connection with the author, that they would actually know that the intent of the author is to help them see that particular part of the story. There are a lot of editors out there that have their own way of thinking, or they take a story and they say, well, it should go this way, or it should go this way, and they don't really consider that that's not what the author meant for it to do. I'm going to use Tim right here as an example, Tim Chismar, because honestly, he was actually one of the first ones that challenged me on this. He writes horror.
Yes.
And the horror that he writes, and it was one of those things where when we came into our relationship together, I actually had to explain to him that, look, I love horror, but I don't like this horror that you're writing. This horror over here makes me want to gag. I want to throw up. I want to go wash my brain out with mouthwash. Give me something. And he just laughs. He thinks that's the best thing. That's the best compliment I could probably pay a boy, because he absolutely loves to hear me say that it's grotesque.
Yes.
And that's what he's going for. Well, it was in those moments and in those conversations and in those times that we had late night talks, and that I actually understood that this man, he really just didn't care what I thought. He was writing to an audience that liked this, and my job was that he is trying to portray that grotesqueness, that disgusting writing was actually the art that he was creating. And whether or not I liked it or not, that wasn't my job.
No.
And my job was to make his message be clear and a little bit more sellable. The thing is, though, is that I think a lot of editors that I've worked with, that I've talked to, and some of them are my friends, and so I can say this, but they actually will not. They stick to this rule book, and the rule book is to have this, and this has to be there, and this has to be there. And the problem is that that's not always the case. The rule book can be thrown away in certain circumstances, and it really has to do with the author. It has to be with what they're trying to portray. I don't think that there are many people out there that go to editors thinking that this is going to be a great experience. I mean, Jason Lavelle, he loves telling me that I'm a savage. Like that's you're a savage. You're just terrible. You're gonna rip and tear, and that's what all editors do. And I actually told him last week, I think it was. I said, look, I'm really sad for you, because if that's the experience that you've had with editors, you need to find a new editor, because my job is not to rip and tear and shred your confidence to, make you feel like you're a peanut in this galaxy of walnuts. That's not my job.
I think Jason's a touch dramatic. Wow. I mean, just a touch, but that's okay. Like how do I put this? So I've been edited by some people that, like, pros. I have had stuff published big time. I've had stuff published on a smaller scale too. Ben Bella Books ripped my article to shreds. To be fair, I need to have my article ripped to shreds, because I was, at that time, I needed to be coached. So someone that actually went and did that and showed me what I was doing, how things were projected, what was their standard, because there is a standard, that there is a certain professional standard that has to be met. I needed that. I needed that. Right. Now, my current editor, I partly want to just work with her because she made a really strong impression on me as a person. I
think I lost you.
Yeah, am I there? Oh, no, it probably just went like a little skip. But my current editor, I knew her as a person, just someone I wanted to work with, and also just on that front, I know that she's going to give a shit, right? And she's going to push me in ways, because this is my next book one book that's being edited right now is my first novel. So going from an epic poem to a novel don't get me wrong, storytelling is storytelling, but I know I need someone that's going to force me to be a little uncomfortable in the sense of, you need to grow here, 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 and here, right? And I need that right now. But that all said, in this same novel, I have a unicorn talking in wingdings dialogue. Because... Oh my gosh. Yes, I do.
How fun.
Well, yeah, because I came up with the idea of spam, and I thought, how would a unicorn literally talk out of its ass? I'm like, wingdings, that works. Now, and it works incredibly well, actually, which I think is funny as shit. But the point is, yeah. But the point is, right? I do have my own presentation that I do think about, and I apply this with every book. I have another book almost ready to go. It's a mini epic. It's a prologue to something that bigger I'm working on down the road. It's very small, so the edits here are very small because it's not a big giant book. But the thing about that one is that has a very unique presentation. And I worry about that a lot for that particular story. And then I have another story where I'm actually trying to sound like Dr. Seuss, which is breaks your brain. I gotta tell you, it just breaks your brain a little bit. That you even try to do something like that, and do it well. Doing it that well is really, really hard. So I mean, so each project of mine has different levels of challenge to it, and so the novel I need to be a little browbeaten, not because I suck, but because I know that, like, especially when it comes to showing and telling, I need to keep improving that part of my game, because in novels, that is a very key nuance and showing and telling versus telling and presenting your story in that regard. Those are the differences between, I think, a good book and a great book. So I know that's what I need to work on. That's where my strengths need to be improved on a little bit more. So my editor will hopefully give me a little bit of a beatdown, because I need it, but in a good way, right? But I also...
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say, is you want to make sure you have an editor that's not going to browbeat you to the point where you give up on your dream to be a published author. I think that's probably the that comes out with Jason is this, that, you know, sometimes there are editors out there that kind of just make you feel like, okay, well, why am I even doing this? And maybe at some points I might have done that to Tim. And maybe at some point all the authors, you know, maybe right now I've got this great kid that I'm working with, and he's writing this fantastic dystopian. I actually cannot wait for this thing to be published. And we're working through it right now, and it's really actually one of those books that I would just buy and read because it's right up my line.
So yeah, so you're so,
okay.
so
anyway, yeah.
So this is something you're really
It says
you're really into it. Right?
Hold on a second. Hold on. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really into this book, and I love it. And anyway, he got his first edits from me this last week, and I felt the need to let him know, look, don't look at all these red marks and get discouraged. I want you to understand that I really, really, really loved your book. And so I try really hard to make sure that each one of my edits includes some good positive feedback, because if you're not giving positive feedback, I feel like if it's all just negative, you're going to really kind of rip somebody up and make them feel like, what's the point? So yeah, and that's why I do what I do with indie authors, because I think a lot of times indie authors just they're so unsure about the
traditional.
Well, I guess the marketplace. They just they don't understand the terrain, I guess, of self-publishing, and so they feel a little bit out of place, and they feel unsure, and they're not sure about the marketing issues, and they're not sure about, I mean, even some of them are nervous about just uploading that book onto Amazon or onto, Ingram Spark. They don't know what they're doing, and they're terrified, and that fear is sometimes crippling, and people will turn around and completely stop what they're doing just because they feel like, well, it's not even worth it, I don't want to go through that. And I think it's really great when you can be an editor that comes on board and says, look, I'm going to help you get through this, and this book is worth it, and let's just work through it and make sure we get all the hiccups, and get some browbeating done. I'm not saying I'm not a good browbeater. I've talked to any of my clients.
Well,
I get in there and I kind of wipe their ass a little bit. That happens.
Yeah.
But it's still at the same time, you got to also kind of pat them on the butt as they go out the door and say, okay, you can do this, and I'm right here with you, and I'm gonna hold you up in case you fall. Because if you don't, then sometimes people they'll get to a certain point and then they stop, or they'll publish that book and they'll sell maybe one copy in 3 years, and they're like,
well, I think, okay, there's two parts to that. I think you're right. I mean, editors have to be human beings too. I think, honestly, to edit is a little divine. I come back and I see another machine. No. Hear me out on this. I think I'm actually giving you a compliment, because I know this because I've been in it. I did magazine stuff, and I could sell submissions for magazines. You understand very quickly why standards exist. You learn very fast because when it's bad. I mean, when it's actually bad, and I'm not going to ever name names. It's terrible.
It's bad.
It makes you openly weep. I mean, openly weep. But I think so. On that side, I understand standards and practices and all that other wonderful fun stuff. But the author's got. I mean, every author has to realize too. I mean, our shit stinks. I mean, that sounds like a really simple thing to say, but the truth of the matter is, we need editors for two very important reasons. We can't self-edit. I destroyed a book of mine a long time. No one can. No one can. No one's perfect, right? I remember this one novel. I knew it needed a serious editing work, but I had over-edited it so much I destroyed it. Because it was just, I was by myself for so long that by the time I showed it to somebody to read, it's just like I just did way too much. I pretty much there are some great ideas I'm going to use someday, but that story is done. I wrecked it. Because you cannot edit on your own. It's just, there's too much, you're too close to it. It's forest from trees, and you need someone to do that, number one. But number two, If an editor is going through all the trouble of giving you red marks galore, right, is going through that trouble, that means they haven't gone into a fit of rage and thrown your manuscript and thing and just run wild and free, going, my God, this is terrible. No, I can't do it. You can't make me do it. If they're going through the trouble of actually correcting your stuff and showing you and trying to help you, they care. I think this is the thing. I think authors there's a little bit of, and maybe I'm just, because Lord knows I've been guilty of reading my own fixings and going, son of a bitch, and I've made this mistake in the past. I'm not gonna make it ever again. You gotta recognize that editors give a shit.
Right.
They're doing what they're doing because they are trying to make your work as good as it possibly can be. The flip side is not every editor is necessarily for you, right? Because some editors, right? Some editors aren't. Tim is a good example. He has a very clear idea of what he's trying to present. He's not for every editor,
right?
Right? He has a very clear idea.
He's not for every reader.
But he's not trying to be. Right? That's the thing about Tim.
No.
Tim is trying to reach a certain niche of people. And he likes horror, right? But he likes nudity too. And that's just a big, he has this, and this is a big part of who he is, right? And there's an audience for it, right? So he's
Strangely, there is.
No. It's not. But again, everybody. But he is comfortable with knowing. He knows who he is. So if the editor goes in there trying to change that, then they're wrong, because that's not what this is about. This is about, okay, yeah, I know it's this, this, and this, but you know what? I want it to be this and this and this. So no, I have another buddy, Randy McCharles. He's working on mysteries, but he's doing a specific formula. So all his character edits, he doesn't want necessarily deep character arcs and edits. That's not what his stories are about. They are like soft-boiled detective stories. So they're gonna hit a certain niche. It's gonna be bang, bang, bang. Please do not mess with this formula, because this formula works for me. Leave me alone. Don't you touch the formula. I will throw the editor can go off the that's it, right? But that's it. Right. Writers need to realize that every writer. I don't care if you're indie, professional, because I know some professional whiners. We'll just leave it at that. And the reality is, our shit stinks, and we need someone to wipe our ass a little bit and go, hey, listen, by the way, you need some help here, and here. We need that. We do. This is about making the work better.
You hit on something that was pretty. Yeah, and you hit on something that's pretty important, and that's just that not every editor is for you. With Tim in particular, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I am not his editor. But the reason that we click is because I get him. It wasn't until I read his memoir that we're working on that I was like, I finally came to really understand and have empathy for, and actually, and really start to love Tim for who he is, which is just an imperfect, perfect being. You know what I mean? Like, and it was that love for him that made me want to keep editing for him.
He is surprisingly a really sweet guy. And a lot of people miss that. A lot of people miss that about him, because again, he does have.
He's overbearing in it. Yeah.
But he's legitimately a really sweet guy, because he gives a shit. He really does give a shit, and a lot of people don't. Yeah. I mean, he made me promise to write a memoir about that particular hard time we were talking about off the air. I promised I would do it, and I will this year at some point. once I clear what's on my current plate right now, it's one of the things I'm actually going to be working on is that particular time in my life. Because she goes, you need to do that because that's a really good story and it's fascinating because it made you. And so you gotta explain that to people. But the reality of the situation, right, is he's a certain kind of cat, and anyone that would try to alter that, no. Now I'd be curious to see what he'd do in a more traditional route down the road, because I think he'd actually do some really good stuff. But he's comfortable with who he is. He knows what he's presenting. Mm-hmm. So the editor needs to be like, okay, this is what this is. I'm not gonna these parts are not for me to decide. They're for Tim to decide, and that right? So and that's the flip side to the relationship. Writers, honestly, we do need to get a thicker skin. If we can't, we have to go in. And again, we can get cleaner over time. We can get technically better over time. But the reality of the situation is our shit stinks. We need someone again, we need someone to go, yeah, listen, this sucks here. Let's make this better. You can do better than this, right? And that's something every writer needs to hear. And I don't care if it's Stephen King, although Stephen King, at this point in his career, probably doesn't need an editor for very much because his stuff's incredibly clean. But the reality of the situation is, getting to that point is a process, and if we don't have people helping us do that, we can't be all we can be.
Well, I'll tell you what. So you, like I said, you and everything, that's very important. But there's a difference of editors out there too. There's many different technical types of editors that you would pick for based on whatever project you have. But the thing that you hit on that was pretty interesting was that that the editors that you would typically go to in traditional publishing, and if they make it, red marks on you, and they tell you, okay, this needs to change, that usually means you change it or you don't get published. Mm-hmm. There's a real big difference between indie and freelance editors versus the acquisition editors. Those acquisition editors, they pretty much are God. What they say goes. Mm-hmm. And that's sometimes very, very difficult for an author to swallow, which is one of the reasons why a lot of indie authors are indie authors. Mm-hmm. Because they don't want to be told, take that junk out. So when you say, an editor can come in here and, tell you to, swipe this scene or change this character or, maybe you should change this little issue here. The last book I told them to completely change the dates, and in another book I told them, actually there was no snow that year, so there can't be any snow in that scene. Those kinds of things. I mean, those authors could really easily come back and say, I don't care. It's my book. And there are times book out there that I've edited that is not to my standard. It's not what I would put. I wouldn't have put it out there. It wouldn't have been my book. And it's so hard for me sometimes to put my name on books like that, because it's like, yeah, I've edited it, but there's mistakes and there's things, because I am not God. And that's one thing that's different from freelance editors to, those acquisition editors is I don't have that end all be all exclamation point period on the end of the sentence comes from the author. And as much as I would love to be able to say, yeah, this is what I did, and this is edited completely to my standard, it's ultimately not my job to do that, because in indie publishing, it's your copyright, it's your book, it's your baby. So I'm just there to help you. Now, if writers, like you said, realized that they had, their ass is dirty and they need to be wiped. If they had that mentality, that maybe they would try to do better to shift and maybe change that manuscript and fit it to what they're hearing from their editor. Of course, I'm getting paid to be written. Mm-hmm. A certain degree. I think that if you're going to fork over that money to get that feedback, maybe you should consider it, or at least get a second opinion. at least say, oh, you know what, actually, let me ask a beta reader if they get the same impression. Because if you don't, you're totally throwing your money out the window.
Well, no, absolutely.
Yeah, over time you can get cleaner, and you can get more polished, and you can get better, and you can have a cleaner, beautiful story. And Stephen King is a great writer, but I guarantee you he has an editor. And
absolutely. And that was part 1 of my conversation with Stacey Smekofske. I said it right this time. I'm Stacey. Yeah, like I said, don't beat me if you see me. But no, this was a really good conversation. Like I said, this is a great one for editors and how you edit and all that stuff. And I really enjoyed it. And part 2 is even better. You'll hear part 2 later on this week, as well as when I announce the winner. And yeah, I think that was good for now. That'll do it for this episode of Just Joshing. So, to support the podcast, you can do a bunch of different things here. You can subscribe to the podcast, Podomatic, Google Play, iTunes, Spotify. I'm on all players. So just click on it, listen to an episode, leave a review, tell your friends. That's awesome. I have a YouTube, Joshua Pentelresco. There are currently 127 archived episodes there, and more are being added all the time. I just added some classic ones with Jane Bernard and Chuck Miller, and some current, more recent ones with Peter Tchaikovsky and Calvin Jims. So definitely check a look there. My books, The Watcher, Storm Dancer, and Wandering God, are available through Mirror World Publishing. Check me out on Amazon, Kobo, wherever you can find books. You can do that there. I have a Patreon page, patreon.com/JustJoshingPodcast. If you feel this podcast is worth your time, if you guys have a couple bucks to spend my way, go ahead and do so. There's bonus content on the Patreon page. Not to mention, feel free to enter this contest that I just put out. All in all, though, thanks very much for listening, and I will talk to you guys next time.
Josh.